The Troop by Nick Cutter is the first horror book I decided to read for the month of October. I'm putting a little bit more of an emphasis on horror for the month of October for obvious reasons, and I have just got to say that it was a fantastic read. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with this book, and that's great coming from a genre that I don't really read. I'm also kind of worried that maybe I set the bar very high for myself. But overall, I gave this book a 4-star rating, which is a very good rating for me, and this is probably a top 50 book overall for me. I'd have to check my list to see where I did place it. But yeah, this is probably a top 50 book. It feels like it should be in that range. This is a super well done, polished book with what felt like an author who had complete control over the story he wanted to tell and how he wanted to tell it. And that is just such a good thing to feel in a story, when you feel like you are just being catered to specifically and the author has no questions or concerns, and there's just like an overt confidence in what they are trying to do with the story. I mentioned that this was the first horror book I plan to read in the month of October. Stick around to the end of the video because I have a slight update and some changes of plans with the other book I had originally planned to read. But what is The Troop about? If you haven't heard, this book follows the story of a group of Boy Scouts who are out on an adventure on an island, and an unexpected guest shows up onto the island, and basically mayhem ensues. And I don't want to spoil too much. I mean, I think it probably tells you in the synopsis that what happens, but I like to be as vague as I can while still telling you what I enjoyed about books I read. So that is kind of the general, layout of the book, and chaos definitely does ensue. And this is not the kind of book that scares you in the, I need to make sure all the lights are on when I go up the stairs, or I need to check every room in my house. This is like a horrific book. It is going to make your skin crawl. There have been times, specifically this past week, where I was eating something and all of a sudden I just kind of got like the heebie-jeebies and just felt weird and had this like sickly feeling in myself that I just had to be like, it was a book. It's not real. Your sandwich is perfectly fine to eat. It was, that's the kind of feeling that this book gave me. This isn't going to be demons, that kind of thing, ghost apparitions, that kind of thing. This is definitely a much more human story with some biological elements to it. And that's part of the horror. And then the other part of the horror is what a person can do to another person. That is actually probably what I found the most horrific in this story. There is a character that is troubled, I think is probably the best way to say it without really spoiling too much. And it's rough. I will say it is definitely rough to read, but overall I mostly only have positive things to say about this. Like I said, the structure and the story, that the way this book is written in, it just works so well. It answers questions. It gives you answers that logically make sense. Like there were points in the story where I was like, well, why don't they just do this? Well, they did, and you get a reason why it didn't work or what happened in that circumstance. There is some fleshing out the story after the fact, which I thoroughly enjoyed. This was something that I was wondering throughout the whole book, like what comes after, because obviously there's an end to this book, but I wanted to know what was going to come after, and I think the story did a wonderful job of doing that. This story also did a really good job of making kids feel like kids, and I think a lot of authors really struggle with that. I know Stephen King and Robert McCannon oftentimes are said to really understand what it's like to write a child in a way that seems realistic. Obviously, you still need them to fit into the narrative and into the story and what you're trying to do, but Nick Cutter does a fantastic job of making our troop of Boy Scouts, who are not children, but in that like awkward, they're growing up, coming to age kind of tale. He does a great job of making them feel real. And while they are in this horrible circumstance, they make logical choices that make sense for them. It has them explore, their morality. There's some Lord of the Fly aspects here. I mean, it's just super well done what he's able to do with the kids. With this being a horror book, I think I'm going to count this as a positive. And I think most people who go into this book with at least knowing the synopsis and some of the brutal things that go into it, they're going to like the fine line it straddles of just being grotesque for no reason. But because it's a horror book, it's like that perfect line of like, this is a horrible thing that is happening. This is disgusting. This is gross. But because of the story that's being told, it just makes perfect sense. There are definitely some hard elements to read in this book that will make you uncomfortable, that will maybe even make you want to like take a break, because there is some pretty dark stuff in here. But because of the style of book this is, you can't go into it expecting these things not to be there. And I think when they are in the book, they are super well done. And there's like a certain chaotic nature to this book that just works so well that, you know, it just, I don't know, I have really not much negative to say about this book. Overall, it is just super well done, and the things I like about it, you know, are just, the kids are great. Honestly, I like the prose for the most part. I think it's very easy to read, very consumable, but paints a vivid picture in sometimes too much of a way that like it's uncomfortable. But that's what I was looking for in this story. And I think that's super important. And the reason I keep bringing that up is I think if you go into this book and you're not prepared for some of the things that are in it, it's not going to work for you. You're going to kind of just, I think, be put off by the fact that there are some very horrific elements in this story. And so I just want to keep emphasizing that go into this book with right expectations, and I think you will have an experience similar to mine. I could see if you go into this and you are expecting something less dark, less horrific, that pretty quickly you are going to want to put this book away. So just keep that in mind when you read. With this being such a good book for me, it's really hard for me to talk about negatives because I honestly don't really have any because I just enjoyed it so much. I guess for other readers, like I already mentioned, the horrific nature of some of the things that happen in this story are just absolutely going to be full stop for some people. I totally understand that even though it's a horror book, even though it's, you know, you go into it with the correct expectations, that just some of the body things that happen, some of the animal cruelty things that happen, you're just going to get to those and you're just going to say, no, this isn't for me. No matter how prepared you think you are, until you actually start reading it and getting to it and realize how graphic and really, really horrific it is, you are going to, you know, think you're fine until you're not. And there's some scenes towards the very end of this book that I thought were extremely hard to read. And like I said, I went into it with the correct expectations, I think, which made me able to enjoy it even though these horrific aspects are around. But I think for some people it is just going to be, like I said, a full stop. No way they are going to be able to read some of the scenes that happen. And I don't want to say it's unfortunate, but you know, the way this story is told, it's just an aspect of it. And I don't know how to say it any differently than it's just going to work for some people, and they're going to be able to read it and process it in the way that I think the author wants you to. And then there are just going to be some people who are so repulsed by what's going on, this book is just never going to work for you. And normally I'm able to go through, you know, a couple more negatives that I have, but I really don't have any. To me, this is just a really, really well done book. It's polished, it's super well done. So with that being said, I think that's all I have to say about this book. If you have read The Troop, let me know down in the comments below. If you're thinking about reading it, let me know why you might or might not. I'm really interested, and I'm not sure, I think this is a fairly popular book, but I'm curious on some of the aspects of it, how people feel about it, because there's some rough stuff. There's some rough stuff in here. And now quickly, just to update a little bit of what my October reading plans were. Originally, I was going to read The Ring. I think most people are familiar with the movie, and I couldn't find it anywhere online for free. You know, I wanted to get it through like the library or something, and my library doesn't have it. None of the apps that I normally use have it, and I really don't want to buy it. This book was kind of more of a curiosity read. I didn't think I would actually enjoy the book all that much. So I am kind of narrowing it down to a few different selections, and let me know down in the comments if you have a preference for one of these that I'm going to read. And then this is coming off my top 10 list, but I think I'm really narrowing it down to either The Shining by Stephen King, Misery by Stephen King, Battle Royale, or The Monk. And those are kind of the four I'm jockeying between, because I can get all of those pretty easily from my library and stuff. So let me know if you have any thoughts on that down below. And once again, let me know your thoughts on The Troop if you have any. And as always, have a good one.